Alright, so welcome back. Here we are with our probably least interesting but most important video, and that deals with measuring the mats and the frame in order to get everything the right size. So today we're going to simulate the measuring and planning stage of a 3-mat framed piece of art. We're going to use this piece right here. It's not a piece I own, it is just a piece of art that I think is colorful and nice, and we're going to start with that, and then we're going to basically plan for it to be this 3-matted framed piece at the end of the day. But there's a lot of math that needs to happen. We need to do a bit of measuring, a bit of arithmetic. It's not necessarily really math. And when we're done, we will be able to know exactly how to cut our mats and the lengths of the frame pieces as well. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that there are two different ways to process your math for framing. One way is if you already have a frame, if you already know the dimensions of the rabbet in your frame, and that is R-A-B-B-E-T. Rabbet is the cutout area within the molding which you place the artwork in. So if you already know the dimensions of that, you'll be able to start with your stock mats pre-measured as far as length and width go. And what you should do is cut them to be 1/8 of an inch smaller than the length and width of your rabbet within your frame. That is one way of starting it. Now that is just determining the size of your mat stock. We're going to be doing it the other way. Most of the work we do, the frame will be cut after the molding has all been cut. So we're going to start with knowing the molding size first, and then we'll cut the frames to custom fit that molding. So we're going to be approaching it from that direction, and so let's get started. First thing you're going to need to know is when you are developing this out is the size of your artwork. So in this instance, this artwork is 20 inches high, 24 inches wide, and the reason you need to know this is because this is determining what your window, your cutout is going to be in your mat. So there's a little bit of information you need to know for that, because you're going to be building this from the inside, which this artwork is the inside out. So being able to start here is where we're at. Now I'm giving these instructions knowing that there's many different ways to mount the actual artwork within the frame. There's different hinge methods. There's actually attaching it to the foam backing. We're going to be using the hinge method where the actual first mat overlaps all the edges of the picture. Now you have to determine how much you want it to overlap, and that is at the discretion of the person creating the mats, and it also is dependent on the artwork. You don't want to cover up any of the artwork if you can help it. But in our case, we're going to be starting with a 1/4 inch overlap. In other words, the artwork will sit underneath the first mat, 1/4 of an inch on each side. So let's take a look at what this is going to look like. As I noted, we're doing a 3-mat build. And this is basically what the build out is going to look like. So as you see here, right here in the inner, you see the artwork itself. Now the first measure on top, if you see the line with the square at the end, that's indicating that piece of art is going underneath the pink mat. So it's going 1/4 of an inch underneath that mat. And then the first mat width I want to be 1/4 of an inch, so that would be the pink one is 1/4 of an inch. The next mat width I want to be 1/2 inch, and the final mat I want to be 3 inches on the left and right side, 2 inches on the top. So we'll be doing our calculations based on this. This is our plan. This is our model. And we're going to be measuring based on this initial presumption. So first thing I need to know is I want to know the width of all of the cutouts for the various layers of mat, and I also want to know the complete width of the final mat. So as you see here, starting from the top, the first one is 23.5 inches. That is based on the fact that the original artwork was 24 inches wide, if you remember, and we are going to be overlaying 1/4 of an inch on each side of the mat. So that being said, with the artwork being initially 24 inches wide, we are cutting we are cutting 1/4 inch on each side, which leaves that opening to be 23.5 inches, as you see at the top. So the second one, because the fact that the pink layer is 1/4 of an inch in width, we add back 1/4 of an inch on each side. So the horizontal opening of the yellow layer is going to be 24 inches. And because the yellow layer is 1/2 inch in width, we will be adding 1/2 inch to each side, which gives you the opening window for the blue of 25 inches. Now, because we want the blue width on each side to be 3 inches, we add a total of 6 inches to the width, and we end up with a total width of 31 inches. That number is very, very important. 31 inches tells us the max width of all of the frame stock, all of the matte stock pieces. So when you layer this, you don't just have, a very small piece of the pink. This pink goes from here. This pink goes from where it's cut all the way to the edge of the frame. So the pink, yellow, and blue will stack and will all be the same total height and width of each other. So that 31 inch width is important to know, because that's how all of the matte stock will be cut to that width. So for height, so this picture was initially 20 inches high, but we are undercutting the pink matte by 1/4 of an inch on the top and the bottom. That leaves us 19.5 inches window space. Because the pink top and bottom width is 1/4 of an inch, we add that to the top and bottom, which gives us 1/2 inch total added, and we end up with 20 inches for the yellow cutout. Because the yellow is 1/2 inch on top and bottom, we add a total of 1 inch back, and we know the internal cutout of the blue is going to be 21 inches. And because we know that the top and bottom, we want that to be 2 inches each, we add 4 inches in, giving us a total of 25 inches from top to bottom. And what does that give us overall? That gives us overall, we know the size of the matte stock to start with is going to be 31 inches wide and 25 inches high. So we can go ahead and cut the pink, yellow, and blue stock down to that size, and that is our starting point for each of those pieces of matting. Okay, so let's start with the pink sheet. So we determined that, of course, the width is going to be 31 inches total, the height is going to be 25, so that's been cut down. Next, we want to use our cutting tool, which we will demonstrate in the next video, to cut out the window, the cutout. So we know that the actual picture is 24 inches wide. We want it to be 1/4 of an inch underneath the cutout, 1/4 of an inch on each side of the cutout. So we take that 24 inches and we subtract 1/2 inch. So the window width is going to be 23.5 inches. And we do the same on top. We know we're going to take 1/4 of an inch off the top of the bottom. The picture initially being 20 inches high, we now take that 1/2 inch off, and we know that the vertical cut of the window will be 19.5 inches. So now we have 19.5 by 23.5 inch cut. So that's great. We know how long the cuts are going to be, but what's more important is we need to know, because of the way the tool works, we need to know the actual widths of each of the sides of the pink layer. So what we need to do next is determine that. So what we want to be looking at is the vertical sides here. And in order to determine the width of the vertical side, we have to take the total of the width and subtract the total of the horizontal cut, and then divide that by 2. So if we see it here, we see the total width is 31 inches. The horizontal cutout is 23.5 inches. So we subtract that, we get 7.5 inches. And then we divide that 7.5 inches and we get 3 3/4 inches. That is the width of each of the side elements. Now we do the same thing for the top and bottom widths as well. So we have 25 inches height, 19.5 inches for the cut. So 25 minus 19.5 equals 5.5. And we divide that by 2, and we get 2 3/4. So each of the top and bottom widths are 2 3/4 inches. So the reason we have to figure out exactly what the width of these sides and top and bottom are is because that's the way the tool works. The tool, we set the depth of the side, and then we make the cut for the length of the segment we want to cut. So we will be cutting the pink 2 3/4 on the top and bottom, 3 3/4 on the sides. At that point, we will have the perfect overlay to set on top of the artwork, and we will have 1/4 of an inch of the art underneath each side of this mat. So next we want to cut the yellow piece. We have to follow the same procedure we just did for the pink. We still know that the total width and height of the mat stock is going to be 31 inches wide, 25 inches high. So again, we want to figure out what the left and right widths are. So we take the full width of 31 inches and subtract the cutout of 24 inches, and we get 7 inches. We then divide that by 2, and we get 3.5 inches for each side of the yellow mat. And again, we follow this procedure for the vertical side. So we take the 25 inches vertical, subtract the 20 inches of the cutout, we get 5 inches. We divide that 5 by 2, we get 2.5 inches, and the top and bottom mats are going to be 2.5 inches for the cut width. All right, so now we have the width, top and bottom, left and right cut depths for our tool. And the final mat, the blue one, again, 31 inches wide, that's going to stay that way. 25 inches height, that's going to stay that way. We know that the width of the cutout is going to be 25 inches, so we subtract that 25 from 31, and we get 6. And we divide the 6 by 2, and we get 3 inches. So that blue is 3. And we have the 25 inches height and the 21 inch cutout. And we subtract 21 from 25, we get 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now, we said all along we wanted the blue to be 3 and 2. I just wanted to validate that the math, calculating it this way, we come up with the same answer either way. We initially intended on being 3 inches and 2 inches. We confirmed that by doing the math that the cutouts will indeed leave a 3 and 2 inch width for the blue layer. So as I mentioned, we're looking at this from the perspective that we are going to be cutting the frame after we already know the size of the final matting. We know the mat will be 31 inches wide and it will be 25 inches high. So you leave about 1/8 of an inch of play in the rabbet, greater than the cut of your materials. So now at this point we have calculated the frame. The frame's rabbet, and that is measured at the deepest part of the rabbet, not at the edge, but all the way at the back of the rabbet. So we now have a 31 1/8 inch rabbet on the horizontal pieces, and a 25 1/8 rabbet on the vertical pieces. And once this is all put together, the frame being, we can then lay in our piece of acrylic, which will be 31 by 25. We will lay in the blue and yellow matte pieces, and then we will attach the artwork to the pink mat, and we'll cover attaching methods probably in one of the latter videos as we're putting this together. There's a bunch of different ways of attaching the art, but so you will attach the art to the pink layer, you will put the pink layer in, you'll put your foam backing, and you'll seal it all up, and you will be done with your piece of art. But as I mentioned in the previous video, measuring before cutting, understanding your artwork, and the plan that you have set up for framing this is very important. The pieces of stock, the mat, the frame, all that are not terribly expensive, but mistakes cost money. They cost resources, which are both money and time, because you have to redo things. So if you make mistakes, it's frustrating. It wastes time. It wastes money and material. And so if you're very careful in this stage, things will come together very easily, and you will probably find that the hobby is a lot more fun than if you just wing it and find yourself screwing up the final product repeatedly. So measure twice, cut once. It's pretty easy math, arithmetic, shall we say, and it's just a matter of planning and thinking. Think it through. Draw pictures. Just plan. Really, it's what it boils down to. Have a good plan moving into the project, and you'll come out with a good product in the end. All right? Hopefully this was not too convolutedly explained. I did my best to get across what I was trying to get across, but hopefully I was able to help you out with a little bit of knowledge here on how to do this, and your projects will go smoothly as well. So we'll see you next time, and hopefully next time we may actually be unboxing our cutting tool and getting to play with a little bit of the matte pieces. So hopefully we'll be moving on to that stage of the project. I look forward to sharing it with you. See you later.